Just a few housekeeping things before we start. If we could all turn our mobile phones either to silent or turn them off, because that's always very embarrassing if they go off halfway through. The toilets, should you require them, are out those back doors. Turn right. The gents are immediately on your left. The ladies, if you carry on straight down the stairs, turn left and then left again. They're there. And the disabled toilets are straight through there, through the next doors and on the right. We're not expecting any fire drills, so if you do hear the fire alarm, it is a genuine fire alarm. The evacuation route, the quickest way out of here is through those back doors, through the next doors, turn left and down the stairs into the car park, and the muster point is outside the police station on the other side of the high street. So, I'll start with the minutes of the last meeting. Have the committee all had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yep.
Do I have a proposal for the minutes?
Yeah, proposal. Yeah, happy with that.
Seconded. All in favour? Yes, unanimous. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. And any urgent business? Nothing on that either. I'll sign the minutes. Try to. Could you pass those back to me? Okay, the substantive part of why we're all here today. Report of the Director of Neighbourhoods to determine an application for a variation of the premises licence under Section 34 of the Licensing Act 2003 for the Harbour House, Ride Harbour, Esplanade, Ride Isle of Wight, PO 33 1JA. I assume that all parties have received a copy of the procedures that we'll be operating under today and understand them. I'll just reiterate that no party has the absolute right to cross-examine any other party. The hearing shall take the form of a discussion led by the authority, and cross-examination shall not be permitted unless the authority considers that it is required for it to properly determine the representation's application's notice. And the equal maximum period of time will be given to the parties in which to present their case and provide any further information considered relevant to the application or to the promotion of the licensing objectives. Persons speaking can amplify their original representations. However, any new evidence that has not been formed part of their representation may not be taken into account. So I'll move on to the licensing officer to summarise their report. Mr. Patchler.
Thank you. An application for a variation of a premises licence was submitted on the 1st of February 2022 by Mr. Cole Harding. Premises concerned is known as Harbour House and is located opposite Ride Harbour, Esplanade, Ride Isle of Wight. Consultation period associated with the application ended on the 2nd of March 2022. The application proposes to extend the opening hours of the business from 2300 hours to 0130 hours, whilst also proposing to extend the following licensable activities: supply of alcohol from 2300 to 0100 hours, recorded music from 2300 to 0130 hours. The application also proposes to add the activity of late night refreshment for the times 2300 to 0130 hours. As part of the 28-day consultation exercise, the applicant has agreed to conditions with the police in order to promote the licensing objective for the prevention of crime and disorder. These details can be found at Appendix 3 of the report. During the consultation, Environment and Health have raised concerns with regards to the objective for the prevention of public nuisance. These concerns are based upon previous investigations and assessments carried out by the department following complaints received by members of the public in relation to noise disturbance, which was alleged to have emanated from the licensed premises. Details of these concerns, inclusive of enforcement action taken by Environmental Health in the form of a written warning following the conclusion of the investigations, can be found at Appendix 4 of the report. During the consultation period, 61 valid representations were received from members of the public and other interested parties. 60 of these objected to the proposed variation, with 1 in support of the application. To summarise, concerns raised state that the grant of the variation of licence as per application will further impact nearby residents with regards to noise disturbance from music provided at the premises, noise nuisance from customers, and antisocial behaviour from customers of the business. Details of all concerns raised, as well as those in support of the variation, can be found at Appendix 5 and 6 of the report. The options open to the subcommittee, following the presentation of information from all interested parties, is to grant the proposed variation of the licence as requested by the applicant, grant the proposed variation of the licence as requested but with additional conditions as they may deem appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objectives, or reject the proposed variation of the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Batchelor. Does the committee have any questions for the licensing officer? Okay. We will move on then. Could the applicant, thank you for turning up today. Would you like to present your case, please? If you could use the microphone in front of you, there's a button on the right, speak into that so we can all hear you. You need to turn it on. Should get a little red light on the top. That's all right.
Okay, yeah. Firstly, I'd like to highlight that the application is for an extension of the sale of alcohol. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of bad press from a lot of local bodies, including the local community information, which put out a Facebook page regarding the music, saying that I am applying to increase playing music. I'd just like to say that's not the case. It's not to increase music, it's to extend my current conditions for a later period of time, which my customers really need, and often ask me why I'm closing at 11 o'clock when they can clearly go to other venues to participate socialising during later hours. For example, the Crown shuts at 12 p.m, Wetherspoons 12 p.m, Black Sheep 2 a.m, Fumo 1 a.m, Coburg's 3 a.m, Artisan 1 a.m, Rocket Ronnie's 12 p.m, and myself 11 p.m. So that is to improve the facility to customers, holiday makers and local residents in the area that use my facility on a regular basis. I often have to turn people away because I'm so busy, which proves that it's a successful business which the area needs. Now, if we look at businesses in the local area, for example, the balcony is closed down, the ice rink is derelict, it's complete eyesore. If you then go up George Street, you've got hotels that are derelict. So I firmly believe that this business is growing and has created a facility that is much needed in the area. There are various berth holders in the harbour that use the harbour for a full summer period and live on their boats that use my facilities are regular customers. Also, part of the bad press that hasn't helped my application. For example, Island Echo I've got the evidence here, but they printed a picture of broken wood within my perimeter, and the caption reads vandalism. Now, I removed that wood to create a new glass barrier at the front edge, which is now in place. There is a glass barrier at the rear edge to prevent potential noise pollution, antisocial behaviour. I've installed new audio equipment. Steve on the left is a technician in that department. So it's controlled at a much easier level. I've agreed with the police's conditions, which they are in support of the application. So at this point, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Does the committee have any questions for Mr. Harding? No. I've got one for you, sir. In the reports that are submitted, and the noises seems to be one of the key issues. You're asked to keep a log of noise monitoring, which you've included in this, which is we have in front of us. And I note on one occasion that the log was kept, and it says repeatedly from the same location, every half an hour, bass beat heard, adjusted. Now I understand how, for instance, on the first occasion it would be too loud and you adjusted it. How then half an hour was it too loud again and adjusted, and then half an hour again adjusted, half an hour again adjusted? What was going wrong? Clearly the first adjustment, the second adjustment, etc. didn't work.
There's the noise levels during as the evening progresses. There are a lot of things that influence that, i.e. traffic, that can disperse at any one given time. So if you do a reading in half an hour, there's traffic going by, and naturally the traffic will decrease later in the night. So you have to adjust accordingly, which is what you try to do.
Thank you. The responsible authorities to present their case. I think this is Mr. Power coming.
Morning, committee members. So I'm Dan Power, part of the regulatory services team and environmental health. So I've considered it necessary to submit a representation against the variation application, given my concerns regarding the licensee's ability to safeguard key licensing objectives. And in this case, most notably, the prevention of public nuisance objectives. Now, I appreciate that you've had the opportunity potentially to look through the pack. However, if I may, I'd like to take you through some of my accompanying representations and documents, if possible. So you'll find my representation titled Appendix 4 on page 53 and 54 of the pack. Here you'll find confirmation of efforts to discuss the variation with the applicant, which occurred on the 15th of February. You also find reference to my previous interaction with Mr. Harding in response to the department receiving 7 separate complaints of noise nuisance with reference to a previous temporary event notice held between the 30th of July and the 1st of August. Now, DPO 1, which may be located on page 55 to 58 of the pack, confirms that the applicant received a written warning with reference to further action being pursued via the noise nuisance legislation, which is primarily the Environmental Protection Act, and if necessary, by way of considering the premises licensing review. Now, the reason for that was that, in the opinion of the department, the public nuisance objective had been undermined by the licensee. So again, this was in response to approaching the gentleman on 3 occasions on that very day during the 10 to make the gentleman aware that the music on site was having the effect of causing disturbance to local residents. Now, I can't emphasise that enough. On 3 occasions, we've had calls to make contact with a gentleman, the first of which occurred at 6:30 that evening, where an officer went out, met with the gentleman who adjusted the bass at the time of the visit, only for the officer to go back at a later point and confirm that it was an issue again. So I attended just before midnight, so at 23:55 hours. Now, this follows a call made by a separate officer, again to reiterate the officer's initial observations. And I confirmed that the music levels and the accompanying bass originating from Harbour House was likely to cause significant disturbance. And I have to emphasise the significant disturbance to local residents here. Now, page 57 provides a summary of noise monitoring levels obtained at the time of my visit. The 4 observation points I used to monitor the noise mirror the licensee's commitment to monitor noise levels from those very points. Now, the gentleman provided a noise report to accompany the temporary event notices at the time, and I was advised that a process of program even of noise monitoring would occur from those very points. So we replicated those points at the time. Now, I've highlighted location 2 in particular, and it's with reference to the rear of Richmond House on the Strand. Now, you'll find the readings provided at the time by the box underneath location 2, rear of Richmond House. Now, if I may, and I won't labour too much on this point, but I feel it is pertinent here. I've looked at what we call the LEAQ. So this is the equivalent continuous sound at the time, and also what we call the 63 hertz octave frequency band. Now, to put it short, effectively that's an indication of low frequency bass at the time. So with regards to the continuous equivalent sound at the time, from location 2, we monitored the levels of noise to amount to 59.2 dB. That may not mean much right now, but with regards to those levels recorded, they exceed maximum levels set by the World Health Organization with reference to their guidelines of community noise. Now, they suggest that at that time of night, outside the bedroom, we should be around the 45 dB mark. So you'll see there's about a 14.2 dB difference between the actual levels and what is considered the threshold for disturbance. Now, again, 14.2 dB may not sound a lot, but for context, if you consider that a 10 dB increase in noise amounts to a doubling of the loudness of the noise, effectively, at that time, the music from Harbour House was over double what it should have been just to avoid disturbance at that time of night. Moving on to the 63 hertz octave frequency band, which again is a measurement of low frequency noise. It measured 83 dB at the time. Again, it's worth noting that this is a temporary event notice. It's provided and with the intention of the applicant's extended licensable activity, which included regulated entertainment, so live and recorded music at the time. It wasn't intended to accommodate a concert-like event. However, the bass levels recorded at the time exceeded 80 dB. Now, again, this would cause significant disturbance. And I referenced part 3 of the Code of Practice on environmental noise control at concerts, which specifies anything over 80 dB at a concert would be considered significantly disturbing. Again, I don't have to point out, this was a premises license at the time. So again, to put it into context, the bass levels emanating from the site at the time, after midnight on the 1st of August, exceeded and regularly hit, but the emphasis on exceeded, bass levels obtained at the Isle of Wight Festival at its closest residential dwelling, respectively. So it just goes to show the extent of the bass at the time. Now, we don't just take into account the numbers, you also have to take into account the subjective assessment on site. So at the time, bearing in mind it was after midnight, one of the complainants was willing to have me in their home at that time of night to subjectively assess the noise, which I did. So during this time, I described the music noise levels as clearly perceptible throughout the complainant's property, regardless of room, and the accompanying bass to go with that as intrusive. So it would have had the effect of directly impeding the complainant's use of their home after midnight on that night. And we have to take into account the premises is 80 metres away from the receptor in which I visited that night. Yet music was perceptible and the bass was intrusive. So all that suggests, and I've confirmed this on page 58 of the pack, that the licensee undermined the public nuisance objective on this occasion. So if I may, I wish to highlight DPO2, which is available on page 59 to 60 of the pack. Now, this document is a venue risk assessment and accounts for the variation. So it seeks to increase the hours of licensable activity. And there may have been some confusion there, but as far as I'm concerned, I understand that regulated entertainment is part of that application. And it would have the effect of extending those hours of regulated entertainment from 2,300 hours as it is presently to half one on each day. So this assessment is provided by the Institute of Licensing and the Institute of Acoustics, and it seeks to ensure good practice in relation to the control of noise from places of entertainment. Now, to put together the risk assessment, it takes into account key criteria, and it includes the number of events, the time of events, proximity to local residents, venue sound installation performance, and confidence in management. And after which, you score it and you assess what sort of risk you'll be provided with. So page 60 of the pack confirms that in considering the key criteria, Harbour House would be considered high risk and likely to result in increased likelihood of noise complaint. So the associated risk rating considers the existing lack of confidence in management with regards to noise control, given the incident that occurred only in August, and the premises complaint history, which the department has received 10 complaints in relation to noise disturbance between 2019 and 2022, bearing in mind the pandemic during those times has stifled the true extent of the business activity at the premises. The rating also considers the applied hours after 2,300 hours, which again is likely to increase the likelihood of noise complaint, and also, which is quite pertinent here, the outdoor setting in which the applicant would intend to use. So page 61 of the pack confirms details of further information I provided during the consultation period, again given its relevance to the variation application. And you'll find DPO3, which is available on page 62 of the pack. Now, it provides a summary addressed to the applicant in response to a telephone discussion I had with Mr. Harding on the 19th of July 2021, where I raised concern regarding the applicant's regard for the public nuisance objective. Now, this was in response to the applicant suggesting that residents will inevitably be disturbed by music levels from the premises during a tent. So in response to this, Mr. Harding was asked to provide further information pertinent to each event, and this may be found again in DPO3. So you'll find a request for the genre and description of music played, whether events consist of a DJ, noise control and abatement during these times, and so on. So pages 64 and 65, which make up DPO4 of the pack, confirms that the applicant sought the assistance of a licensing consultant. So this resulted in the premises providing a noise management plan to be applied at the time of the temporary event notices. And as such, the TENs were not objected to on this occasion, bearing in mind the controls that have been identified. Nevertheless, again, DPO5, which you'll find on page 66 to 69, provides confirmation of the completed noise monitoring logs with reference to the 10 dated between the 31st of July and the 1st of August. So on review of the logs, those responsible did not account for Ms. Saligo's initial visit at 6:30, where the officer advised that measures to reduce the base levels were required. There's no indication of that on the logs. And you'll note this to be the case on reviewing the logs again between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. So if you look at those logs, which is on page 66 of the pack, you will not find any indication of an officer coming down and making the premises aware that there was an issue with base. It's also worth noting that despite the log sheet between 9 p.m. and midnight, which is available on page 68 of the pack, indicating measures occurred to address the base levels, and I know the issue has been mentioned already. Despite that, and despite an indication of base levels being adjusted, if you take into account a subsequent visit between 23:55 and 1 a.m, it was confirmed that the music noise levels and the accompanying bass continue to adversely affect local residents at the time of night when I visited. So the log suggests that at no stage of the 10 did the premises actually consider the music noise levels Setting aside the issue of base, there's no indication of that as likely to cause disturbance to local residents. So with reference to the variation application, the premises response to noise control, particularly during the hours of 2300 and 1 a.m. This is incredibly important, bearing in mind the application relates to those very hours. It's been ineffective in terms of noise control. It's culminated in public nuisance, given the noise complaints we've received. And to provide a degree of permanence to those hours, given the evidence to date, is only likely to further undermine the public nuisance objective. So on this point, I ask the members to consider DPO 6, which is on page 70 of the pack, provides an aerial map indicating the approximate locations of residents who contacted the Environmental Health Department via its out-of-hours service to raise concern regarding noise disturbance associated with the temporary event notice dated the 31st to the 1st of August. So the exhibit serves to demonstrate the wider impact of public nuisance here as a consequence of the premises temporarily extending its hours. And again, these hours roughly in line with the hours applied for. If I may, part 215 of the revised guidance issued under section 182 of the Licensing Act states that on the matter of public nuisance, in considering the promotion of this objective, the licensing authority must focus on the effect of the licensable activities on persons living and working in the area around the premises. Now, the premises approach to public nuisance objective has been tested. We've got evidence of this now via the use of the temporary event notices, and has resulted again in significant disturbance and noise complaint. So to conclude, I've had regard for part 2.5 of the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy, which recognises the need for a balance, quite rightly, which safeguards the licensing objectives whilst ensuring licensable activities are an important part in the cultural life of our community. However, this should not be at the detriment of local residents, and the premises noise complaint history, as well as the observed undermining of the public nuisance objective, as was the case during the visit, suggests that any extension here will only result in additional complaint and further disturbance to local residents. I appreciate your time, and by all means, I invite any questions from members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Power. Before we move on to questions for Mr. Power, can I just confirm from the licensing officers that as part of this variation, it does include recorded music being extended to 1:30 in the morning? That seems to be what I've got in my pack. The applicant seems to suggest it wasn't. Mr. Power seemed to suggest it was, and the pack seems to suggest it
That's
is.
correct. Page 28 of the report is part of the application, and the application does state that recorded music is to be extended from the existing hours, which are 2300 to 0130 hours. That is the proposal within the application on page 28.
Thank you. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make that absolutely clear. Do we have any questions from Mr. Power? No?
Yes, I have a question. I'm just concerned with the officer's report when they visited. It's on the application form, it's put, and I find this very concerning. The officer stated, I must add that I was concerned with your response, suggesting residents will be inevitably disturbed given the nature of the event. That to me shows a lack of any compassion or concern that the residents may have. And I find that with the amount of complaints that have come in, just to be quite disturbing. And what do you intend to do to mitigate that?
Well, anything, short is placed on the 28th of July, 21st of July, November 31st of July. Prior to that event, I was contacted by Neighbourhoods telephone conversation. He asked what I was going to put in place to get public nuisance noise pollution.
Sorry, can I just ask a question about this so that we can...
Yes, sorry. Yes, I received a telephone conversation from Daniel Power prior to that event. He asked me what I was going to put in place to prevent public nuisance and the noise levels. My response was, what are the noise levels? As it's my responsibility to find this out. And his exact words were, there aren't any.
Is that correct?
If I
And
may.
sorry, I haven't finished. And then after the event, he came to me with various decibel levels, frequencies, a audio machine that he'd learnt to use over 2 years at college. So I feel that was information that was withheld, which didn't help.
Mr. Perrin.
Yeah, thank you. So the gentleman did ask a question with regards to specific noise levels. Now, ultimately, they were held back because I needed to ask further information with regards to the general description of the music, and that is all evidence within that email back to the gentleman. Now, in addition to that, when you take into account that the gentleman the very next day sent over a noise monitoring plan, which had no indication of doing any noise monitoring on site other than by a subjective assessment, there was no need to provide any noise levels because he didn't have the kit available to actually adhere to those levels anyhow. So that information was of no use to the gentleman at that point in time. Provided a noise management plan with a log sheet, which is provided there, in which he would assess from each venue subjectively.
Thank you. I think we will, unless there are any other questions for Mr. Perrin, we will move on to the next section, which is other persons to present their case. This is the chance for members of the public in this instance to have their say. I have a list here. I don't know, because there's a fair few of you, so I want to give all of you a fair chance. Do we mind if I just take them in the order that they're on this list? Is that fair enough? Which would start with Mr. Steve Young. If when I call you, come forward and use a microphone somewhere so we can all hear you. Once the red button comes on, you should be fine.
Cool. So I don't want to add too much because I think Mr. Power summed it up perfectly, to be honest. I mean, I live very close to Harbour House. I'm a local business owner, so I'm not against businesses. And what was going on sort of on Facebook and things like that hasn't, there's nothing to do with me. I haven't been doing this because of that. On that night, when the music was playing until 1:30 in the morning, I've got 2 daughters. They couldn't get to sleep. It was ridiculously loud. Contacted the officers, and neighbours were doing it. Everyone was trying to, it's nothing to do with Facebook. And I'd just like to say as well that if that's going to happen every day of the week, all year round, one day in the summer when, it's summer holidays, you kind of think, yeah, okay. But every night of the week, all year round, children not sleeping, it's just ridiculous. Also like to add that during the one afternoon, I had a guy with blood streaming down his face with no shirt on run through my garden in the afternoon, where my daughters could have been in the garden. It was a sunny afternoon. They were by the windows, scared out of their minds, this guy running through, with 2 guys with bottles chasing them through my garden, and then Harbour House staff chasing them. I'm a self-defense instructor, so I haven't got any problem going out and speaking to these people. But to have my young daughters subjected to that in my own garden on an afternoon in the summer is just ridiculous. That's what I've got to say.
Hello. Everything that you've heard and read in that compendium is absolutely what we've experienced. I'm number 1 on the map, so I'm the closest. I never realised quite the impact that noise disturbance can have on well-being. I know that I tried to escape that noise on that night, but that's not the only time that I've tried to escape noise. And it isn't just the recorded noise. There's an awful lot of screeching and screaming and just noise that permeates from bad behaviour, really. You know, there are an awful lot of people that congregate there and they get very, very drunk. So, I mean, you'll note from the year before when we had when you had the licensing, you know, the debauchery and the drunkenness, you know, they might be terms that seem quite elaborate and, you know, sort of flourishing, but that is exactly the type of clientele that are attracted. And unfortunately, because the sea air brings the noise into us, you know, we hear it almost as if it's in our front rooms, in our bedrooms. You know, the only place that I thought that I could escape would be the internal bathroom that I have. And even then I couldn't, you know, I tried to put a quilt inside the bath and close the door to try to escape it, but still the reverberation was just penetrating the flat. You'll read my account of how I'd called Karen in the afternoon. So, I mean, Daniel has said that the recordings were at 6:30. Well, this started at noon. So it was 13 hours of an endurance test in terms of, you know, trying to live with and cope with that sound being, as I explained, you know, it felt like I was being shouted at for 13 hours. That's how awful it was. But it wasn't just me. It was, you know, 15 flats in Richmond House. There's a 94-year-old on the top floor who's housebound. He can't escape it. Now, if that was a one-off, and if we could have confidence that Carl Harding and his employees actually are responsive and willing to compromise, that would be something that, you know, we could hang on to. But I have absolutely no confidence that actually there is any care whatsoever about our comfort. You know, that seems to be that we're just oldies trying to spoil youngies' fun, you know, and that's really borne out by the visits that I and my neighbours have made to Carl and asked, you know, can you turn the music down? Please, can you turn the music down? It's unbearable. And the hostility and the aggression that we've been met with, and also, you know, the taunts that we need to live somewhere else. And, you know, I'm more of a Bembridge person. I shouldn't really be living in Ryde. You know, these are the sorts of responses I get. So if I had confidence that he could manage noise, you know, that would be one thing, but I have no confidence in that too. If I had confidence that perhaps he respected or gave a damn about anybody other than, you know, his clientele, you know, that would make me feel at peace. But I have none of those reassurances. You know, I've been absolutely fine, but now talking about this, it's making me shake, remembering how inert and powerless I felt at the time, and how disturbing it was. And as I say, not just for me, but if you'll notice that in Richmond House, I think 7 or 8 people actually went to the pains of writing and objecting. So, you know, it really, it's not a solitary problem. It is widespread and it is repeated. And it's, you know, it's disturbing. Just lastly, one of the things that I note is that there is a request for 250, or, you know, for a number of people to attend, 250, you know, capacity. Now, if you've ever visited Harbour House, the area that the outside area is very, very small. So to get 250 people in, or maximum of 250, you would actually have to use the pedestrian walkway. Now, on plenty of times, especially when lockdown had just been finished and Harbour House, one of the few people or the few bars that could open, it was impossible to go past. It was an absolute mass. It was, we were urged to be really careful, and yet there was a throng of people that it was impenetrable. I tried to walk along with my grandson on a push bike, and it was impossible. And people were really, really, as I say, drunk and just reveling. I love the Isle of Wight Festival. I love Glastonbury, but by gum, I don't think I've experienced anything quite as intense and as frightening and as intimidating as that. So if that 250 people were allowed, then actually it would be on the pedestrian area. So it isn't actually confined to the Harbour House itself. It would encompass the pedestrian area plus the green areas either side, and they would be, the conduit to the alcohol and the revelry that these people are trying to go for. And that's fine, and I'm not wanting to be a NIMBY. I'd like there to be a thriving business there, but not at the expense of local residents and the good name of Ryde and the reputation of Ryde. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have Elizabeth Medley here? No, right. So there was a name here that. No. Are we? All right. You were next on the list. So I'll go for you. That's right.
I think most of what I was going to say has already been covered, but I just wanted to raise that the venues that Cole was comparing himself to, they're all kind of brick-built venues, whereas I think his building is timber-built, so it's a much sort of flimsier building. And also it's predominantly outdoor. So where he's saying that other venues in the town have late licenses, they're indoor brick-built venues. So obviously the capacity for sound insulation in those is a lot different to what he's got there. I'm a mum of a young child as well, so I had similar problems on that night last year where my 2-year-old, couldn't sleep. And that just doesn't seem right in his own home, that, the windows were physically shaking. And I don't live particularly close. I live at the bottom of Dover Street. So yeah, I was quite sort of shocked at the sheer volume. And I did call as well to say, please can you turn the music down? My toddler can't sleep. And I was told, well, we've got a license, so there's nothing you can do about it. And, very rudely. Also, I think, that they are promoting themselves, for excessive drinking. So if you look at their Instagram posts, if you look at the last 15 posts, 8 of them promote cocktails. And one of them actually states that too many cocktails is just right. They do promotions on 2 cocktails for a cheaper price. So they're obviously promoting, more drinking, which obviously, comes with noise and antisocial behaviour associated to it. And also, I think there's the issue of the rubbish that came after that event as well, because the next day there was broken glass everywhere, so people were clearly leaving with bottles, which then got smashed in the local area, and were a danger to children, dogs and other people. So, yeah, I think like you said, if there was a good idea that they could have restrictions put on them and that then they could stay open later, but they had restrictions put on them last year that the music would be barely audible and that they would provide extra bins, and they didn't do those things. So I don't think we can trust that they won't ignore the restrictions again. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrew Lucas.
Tricky throat. Oh, it's still on. Yeah, my name's Andrew Lucas, live on Bellevue Road. I'll be brief, but put some context. I've had businesses in Ryde for years, hospitality businesses, restaurants, cafes, photo processing labs, all of that sort of stuff. So I know how tricky it can be. The difficulty is really that this is an outdoor venue, principally an outdoor venue. 3 or 4 years ago, when it first opened, it was great. I was a customer. I would go there for lunch, have my 61st birthday there. And it was fine. It was calm, it was relaxing, we looked out over the sea. But then the lockdown came and kapow, it was like Frankenstein's monster. It's really as simple as that. It just out of control. We tried to sort of raise it with people down at Harbour House, but really they were so rude. I mean, I was sworn at, not badly sworn, but I was sworn at, told that we should live somewhere else. You know, this is a similar sort of thing. So quite simply, it's not what it says on the tin. You know, it used to be a nice restaurant with a little bar, an outside seating area. That's how it came into existence. That's why presumably the license was granted. Now it's morphed into this sort of nightclub, where in honesty, the reason 11:30 to 1:30 is because everybody's been chucked out of everybody else. They're already drunk. They arrive there and get drunker. And, you know, that's just the way it is. It's the way it works. If you go down and look at the type of people that are drinking there, it's not me enjoying my birthdays with a couple of bottles of champagne with my friends, which it used to be. And it was great, to be quite honest with you. I really liked it down there. But now, when you can't walk along the front, even at some of the lunchtimes and afternoons, you know, if you've got your grandchildren with ice creams, you now start towards the boating lake and go for a walk along the front. You just avoid that part because it's all, you know, unpleasant. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Gillian Martill.
Hello, right. I've always gone to the local pubs and the local music for about the past 12 years. And I've seen the landlords struggle with their licenses, but they know that they have to stick to that. I know that, and bearing in mind that they're indoors and they're not allowed to have their windows open. The Solent is triple glazed because of the issues prior to the new incumbents. When we had music in there, they always finished at 11, although their license goes to 11:59. Because of noise and environmental issues, they always closed at 11. They would put duvets up against the windows and top that off with foil to reflect back the noise into us. We were like chickens in an oven, but that was all because of the noise. And they were scared that their licenses, you know, they didn't want to go beyond their license. The Simeon, which is equally, you know, in a residential area. And as far as I'm aware, and I've only ever heard that for the Solent, there's only been one person who's ever complained, always the same person. So this has been done for one complainant, not for 60. The Simeon, they have a weekend license, but the landlord mans the door to make, obviously people have to get in through the door, but to make sure that that door is never left open for the same reason, and they don't go extend their license beyond even they're an hour and a half finished before their license ends for those very reasons. Ryde Castle has outdoor music, and I think, obviously, the license committee will know better than me. I think their license is till 10 o'clock, but they don't go beyond 9 o'clock. Right, and then of course there's the balcony, which I think they must have special licenses for scooter weekend, but they then do move inside with security on the doors, and it generally ends, as far as I'm aware, before midnight. I mean, even the Isle of Wight festival, everyone's moved off the main, which Mr. Power said was the same decibel level. The main function area, everyone's moved off there at midnight to go to the outer parts to be away from the all the houses around there. So really, I think my point is that it's an outside space. It's a very different to, you know, and it's asking to extend even beyond what the licenses that the small indoor places have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Douglas Utley. No, okay.
For this hearing, sorry.
I'll move on to.
Sorry, we're just, sorry. Sorry, my husband's having trouble with his hearing. We live on Castle Street, which is direct in line with the harbour. And last year, when you were playing the music loud, in our home, our furniture was shaking and we couldn't get to sleep. That went on for a couple of days, I believe. And it was just totally unacceptable. I've got an illness, my husband has an illness, and it really affected us quite bad, not being able to have any peace. So the thought of you having music regularly, on a regular basis, would just have a detrimental effect on my life and my husband's life. I appreciate that it's a holiday island, but it isn't Ibiza, which I think you're trying to change the harbour into a place like you find on Ibiza.
Could you direct things to the committee, please, rather
Sorry,
than the applicant?
I just don't think what the gentleman is looking for is suitable for the area where we live. It's a quieter area, and as Jill was pointing out, all the other public houses, they finish round about 11 o'clock. They have their licenses. Nobody goes on till about 1:30, and it would affect us quite badly.
Okay, thank you.
Because there's no barrier. We don't have any houses in front of where we live, so we're in direct line. And it's really, really loud, and the windows were shaking and the furniture was shaking. That's nice, thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on now to, I think, the final one, unless there's anybody else, which will be Councillor Luciani.
Hi,
I had you down
just-
last on my list, Councillor Luciani.
So
that's
just to
all.
make it clear, I'm actually speaking on behalf of Ryde Town Council,
Yes.
not as myself as
I
councillor.
understand that, you're
Okay.
speaking on behalf of Right Hand Council.
Okay, so I'm just reading the what was submitted. So Ryde Town Council have the following observation on the premise licence variation of Harbour House. Ryde Town Council have in 2021 taken the lease for Eastern Gardens and will take the freehold ownership for Ryde Harbour from April 2022. Ryde Town Council also own the skate park near the establishment. Therefore, Ryde Town Council have a vested interest in seeing what happens in the area of the Esplanade is of positive benefit to the area and to the community. As a result of our own observation and numerous complaints from Ryde residents and visitors in the harbour, Ryde Town Council were made of numerous incidents, including fighting, loud music, shouting, drinking outside licensing period, drunkenness, criminal damage, and incidents of pollution in the harbour. This has all happened under the present licensing constraints and will only get worse, i.e. later into the night and more intense, as it would be the only establishment with this licence in the area. With respect to the 4 licensing principles, Ryde Town Council makes the following observations. The prevention of crime and disorder. Ryde Town Council have witnessed and been informed of numerous incidents of drunken behaviour and several incidents of violence and criminal damage. Public safety. Ryde Town Council have seen large amounts of broken glass left on the Esplanade outside these premises in the morning, and additional gangs of drunken people have been witnessed late at night leaving this establishment in an uncontrolled manner. Prevention of public nuisance. Rye Town Council have been made aware by harbour users, visiting yachts and Ryde residents of major disturbance that this premises causes to them with regard to late night loud music, noise rather, and disturbance. In addition, Ryde Town Council staff have witnessed while operating their own events on Eastern Gardens behaviour from these business patrons, which amounts to public nuisance. Protection of children from harm. Ryde Town Council have no direct evidence of harm to children, although they are sure, that they would be kept awake and influenced by witnessing of foul language and violence. Conclusion, Ryde Town Council object to this application in the strongest terms, before any thought is given to these premises having its licence extended to longer hours. An effort should be made by the licensing authority and the licensee to make sure that the existing licensing restrictions are properly adhered to. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Do any of the committee have any questions from anyone we've just heard from? It's all been said. It's all been said. Okay, thank you. We'll therefore move to the summing up, and I'll start with Mr. Power, if I may.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just two issues, if I may, and I won't take much time on these. Firstly, on the issue of the temporary event notices. Temporary event notices, the system behind TENT, is typically referred to by licensees as a bit of an acid test to assess whether long-term premises should apply for extended hours. Now, the evidence is clear. When those hours have been put forward and licensable activity is taking place during those hours, it's resulted in subsequent noise complaint and undermined the objective. And the last point, if I may, is more a personal note with regards to working in this area for some time, different authorities. One of the issues environmental health typically find at a review of a licence or when submitting representations is trying to demonstrate and evidence public nuisance. It's very easy for me to say there's an issue and there's a public nuisance if I've gone to premises and have established that the noise from a premises is causing disturbance. But actually being able to evidence that by having residents around the table confirming it too isn't something that we tend to have the luxury of having. So typically we're trying to put forward this idea of a premises undermining a public nuisance objective in the absence of any residents actually confirming that's the case. Now that's clearly not the case in this instance. I don't think I've ever experienced an occasion from a licensing perspective whereby we've had this strength of support against an application. But that's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Power. Is there anything from the public or from Ryde Town Council that you'd like to add, or just to sum up? Well, we said it all. Okay. I'd like the applicant to sum up, please, if you would. Could you turn your microphone on, please?
I would just like to add that in relation to some of the points that was raised, glass does not leave the premises. Any broken glass in that area, which is an occurrence along the whole of the Esplanade, is not from my premises because it doesn't leave my premises. And there's no evidence to support that. I don't sell bottles, period. The green adjacent to Peter Pan's, which isn't next door, is continuously used by locals that purchase alcohol from the local shop in Monckton Street and picnic area and cause all sorts of problems. And I feel that's an easy way to point it towards me in relation to people running through people's gardens. There was an assault on the green that was witnessed by people in the area. The offenders were chased after to control the issue. There was no way, anyway, a customer from my establishment. It was again, people on the green causing havoc as they do throughout the year. The antisocial behaviour, there is continuous break-ins in the boats throughout the year. Vandalism, break-ins that happen year on year before the harbour house was even built. And that's an ongoing problem. Now, everything is being directed towards the harbour house when this is clearly not the case. My customers range of all ages. I have a 70th birthday request for this December. I have done weddings, funerals. To suggest that I'm trying to create a nightclub environment is false. I'm not applying for a nightclub licence, for one. It's an extension of my current conditions. Now, I accept mistakes were made for a one-off event on the 31st of July of last year. However, that hasn't been mentioned. I also did a second event on bank holiday, August bank holiday, and Daniel actually visited me and said, "You're doing everything correct." There was a DJ event on top of the balcony on that same evening that caused all sorts of complaints and were confused with the Harbour House. So I'd just like to summarise. I would like to work with local environment agencies to come to a solution to create a venue that is becoming busier because it's popular from people of all ages. And that is only good for Ryde. That creates growth and employment into the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Would Mr. Batchelor like to sum up for us, please?
Thank you. Just before I go through my summing up process, I just want to clarify a couple of points that interested parties and the applicant have spoken about. One of the points is the applicant and the interested parties have compared the current premises Harbour House to other licensed premises within the area of Ryde. Basically, the national guidance of section 182 guidance, section 17, says that each application must be based on its own merits. So you cannot consider other premises operating hours, activities, etc. When determining this application. So just wanted to sort of clarify that. Second point, there was a mention of capacity at the premises, 250 persons. Obviously, the capacity isn't determined under the Licensing Act. That will be determined under sort of fire regulations, fire reforms with regards to how safe it can be for a certain amount of people to be in a particular premises at any one time. So obviously that particular part can't be considered either. Finally, the nature of the premises. People have mentioned maybe it turning into a nightclub or being this or that. The actual hours, activities and conditions within the licence is what we're considering, not the nature or the type of or the perception of a particular place and how it is operating as such. So it would just be the timings, the activities, the conditions, not, you know, it's going to be a nightclub, so you'd be directly opposed to that because of that particular statement. Okay. So those parties that have objected to the proposed variation application have stated that there are already instances where the activities taking place at the licensed premise are impacting and undermining one or more of the 4 licensing objectives, and that should the grant of the variation go through today, it will further undermine those objectives. Concerns surrounding the undermining of the objective for the prevention of public nuisance has been supported by Environmental Health, and they are the lead responsible authority for this objective. The view of this department, licensing department, has come from complaints being, the view of the Environmental Health has come from complaints being received and investigations and assessments being carried out in relation to such complaints. This has culminated in enforcement action being taken in the form of a written warning being given to the current licence holder of the premises. So after considering all this information prior to and during the hearing, it's the view of the licensing authority that the extension of the operational hours and licensable activities is likely to have a significant impact on the objective for the prevention of public nuisance and should therefore be refused. Members should determine the application in accordance with section 35 of the Licensing Act 2003 and the Licensing Act Hearings Regulations 2005, Just to repeat again, so the options open to you today are to grant the proposed variation of the licence as requested by the applicant, to grant the proposed variation of the licence with additional conditions as you deem appropriate and proportionate to promote the objectives, or to reject the proposed variation of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelor. The subcommittee will now retire into private session while we contemplate this. So I'm going to suspend the meeting for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What's the time now? I'll make it about 10 past. So we should reconvene at about 20 past. Okay, thank you. think everyone is present again. Sorry for that slight delay. We had technical problems with the printer. I'd like to reconvene the meeting. I'd like to hand over to Jodie Gibson, our legal officer,
Thank you, Chair.
who will read out the decision.
Upon receiving the report of the licensing section, oral and written evidence from the applicant, responsible authorities and other persons, and having regard to the guidance issued under section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and the Isle of Wight Council's Statement of Licensing Policy, the subcommittee hereby rejects the application as it considers it appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. The reasons for this are, having regard to the representations from the responsible authorities, the subcommittee are persuaded by the evidence of environmental health before them that no conditions can be appropriately applied to mitigate the harm caused by the proposed variation to this licence in respect of the licensing objective, the prevention of public nuisance. The subcommittee therefore consider this decision to be appropriate for the promotion of that licensing objective. In reaching the above decision, the subcommittee have had regard to the Human Rights Act 1998 and in particular Article 1 of the first protocol, Article 8 and Article 6. The subcommittee consider this decision is proportionate and appropriate for the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives under the Licensing Act 2003. There is a right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court if anyone is dissatisfied with this decision, and any appeal must be made within 21 days of the date of notification.
Okay, thank you very much everyone for coming along today. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you.